Before the bridge finally gave way, people in this city swear they were being watched, just waiting for the end. Look, this isn't just some campfire story made up for a thrill. It comes from a real place, a town that started feeling heavy, as if the air itself was changing. For months, people there felt like they weren't alone in the quiet. It wasn't just a myth. It was a response to a real creeping fear that gripped the city right before everything finally broke. To understand what happened, you have to picture Point Pleasant exactly as it was back then. It's tucked right where the Ohio and Kanawha rivers meet, a place that, for the longest time, was just another quiet spot on the map. Life there followed a very specific, predictable rhythm. People woke up, went to work at the local plants or shops, and came home to the same houses they'd lived in for decades. It was the kind of town where nothing ever really changed, and for most people, that was usually a comfort. But as the mid-60s rolled around, that comfort started to curdle into something else. There was this growing economic tension in the air. Jobs weren't as secure as they used to be, and you could see it in the way the buildings started to look. A bit more weathered, a bit more rusted. The streets, which used to feel safe and familiar, started to feel empty much earlier than they should have. It wasn't that people were afraid of each other, but there was this unspoken sense of decay that seemed to settle over everything like a thick, invisible fog. You'd stand by the river at dusk, and the silence wouldn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt heavy, like the town was holding its breath. The nights were incredibly still, but not in a way that let you sleep soundly. You'd hear the metal of the old bridges groaning in the wind, and it just felt wrong. It wasn't a place of immediate danger yet, but there was this collective psychological weight. Everyone felt it, but no one really had the words to describe it. It was just a feeling that the foundation of their world was getting fragile, and that the atmosphere was shifting from ordinary to deeply unsettling. By November of 1966, that heavy feeling in the air finally started to take a specific shape. But it wasn't because of some big dramatic event. It was much quieter than that. People started coming forward with these reports. They were brief. They were deeply unsettling. These weren't long, detailed stories meant to entertain. They were just short, repeated observations. They sounded more like someone trying to convince themselves they weren't actually losing their minds. You'd hear about a guy driving home late from a factory shift. He sees something tall standing by the side of the road. Or a couple out in the woods. They feel a pair of eyes on them. Not animal eyes. Something that felt intelligent and completely wrong. They'd talk about glowing red lights. They'd talk about a way of moving that didn't fit anything they'd ever seen in the wild. But the thing that really gets to you wasn't the descriptions themselves. It was the tone of the people telling the stories. There wasn't any screaming. There was no outward panic. It was just pure, cold confusion. In a small town like that, fear doesn't explode. It leaks. It travels through the phone lines. It goes over the fences between neighbors. It moves across the counters of the local diner. When one person says they saw something impossible, you can dismiss it. But when 10 people describe the same impossible details, the height, the stillness, the way their dogs started acting terrified before the humans even saw a thing, that's when you stop laughing. That's when you start looking over your own shoulder. This is the most dangerous stage of collective fear. Because when no one understands what's happening, everyone starts looking for a reason to be afraid. Point Pleasant was already in a fragile state. That psychological weight was looking for a place to land. People were exhausted. They were tired of the uncertainty in their lives. And in a strange, dark way, they were emotionally ready to create a symbol. They needed a container for all that dread. Something they could finally name, so they didn't have to keep feeling that nameless, floating anxiety. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to give their fear a face. And once you do that, you can never really take it back. That's when the name finally started circulating. People didn't pull it from some old book of folklore or an ancient local curse. It was just a label, a way to categorize the unexplainable so it didn't feel quite so chaotic. Mothman. It sounds almost like something out of a comic book or a late-night radio show. But for the people in Point Pleasant, it wasn't a joke. It was the only word that seemed to fit the impossible shape they were seeing near the old TNT area and the outskirts of town. The descriptions shifted slightly depending on who you talked to, but every single story shared one chilling detail: the overwhelming feeling of being watched. This thing never attacked anyone. It never spoke. It never made a move to hurt a soul. It just appeared, standing there, perfectly still, watching. And people slowly realized that the Mothman wasn't a predator. It was something else entirely. It wasn't the monster waiting to strike. It was the warning. It all finally came to a head on a freezing evening in December of 1967. It was the middle of the Christmas rush, and the Silver Bridge was packed with cars. People were just trying to get home, thinking about gifts, about dinner, about their families. Then, in seconds, the iron gave way. It wasn't a slow failure. It was catastrophic. Dozens of vehicles plunged into the black, icy waters of the Ohio River. 46 people died that night. In a town like Point Pleasant, that kind of loss doesn't fade. Almost everyone lost someone they knew. And here's the detail that still haunts the people who lived through it. After the bridge collapsed, the sightings stopped. Completely. The figure, the red eyes, the feeling of being followed, gone. The fear that had been building for over a year was replaced by a heavy, hollow silence, the kind that never really leaves. For the people who lived there, the connection was never that the creature caused the tragedy. They believed it was a herald, a shadow cast by something too big to see coming. This is where legends become permanent. When a myth attaches itself to real trauma, it stops being a story. It becomes a scar. Today, Point Pleasant looks very different. There are festivals, statues, tourists taking photos. For outsiders, it's entertainment. But for the older residents, the ones who were there, it's something else entirely. They still avoid certain places after dark. They still lower their voices when the topic comes up. For them, the legend isn't a mascot. It's a reminder. Maybe the Mothman never physically existed. Maybe it was a trick of the light, or a community trying to survive something it couldn't process. But the need for it was real. Cities don't create monsters for fun. They create them because something is happening beneath the surface, something heavy, something wrong. And when you look back at Point Pleasant, the most disturbing part isn't the idea of a creature with red eyes. It's the quiet fact that before everything collapsed, people felt like they were being watched. And it makes you wonder, what might be standing in the shadows of your own life, just waiting for the right moment?